Death and Dementia Part 6, where I left off, our older brother died. I went through the funeral process. I went through dealing with this house. And if you think those things sounded like a pain in the ass, buckle your seatbelt. Because on the suck scale, dealing with the estate was the worst. You know, if you think about the Mick Jagger, David Bowie Dancing in the Street video, how bad that sucked, this is worse than that. And so I urge you, consult a lawyer before doing this. All the states are going to be a little bit different, but to try and do this on your own without somebody helping mediate between you and the court, I couldn't imagine how horrible that would be. Lawyers are going to, you have to talk to them to see what they're going to charge hourly, or where I live, they end up taking a percentage of the final estate, which I think it was only like 2.5%. Don't quote me, but it was something like that. It really wasn't much, and for what she did, it was well worth it. I couldn't have gotten through so many of these things without her. So I urge you to get a lawyer, and if you have a good tax person as well, I urge you to contact them, because you're going to have to deal with not only estate taxes, but you're going to have to do taxes for whoever died up until the point that they died. They were alive, they earned income, so you're going to have two sets of taxes for them. And if you're one of those people that does taxes on your own, good for you. I don't even try and touch it. I get an expert. I don't need the IRS coming after me for my mistakes. No one's going to pay attention to you at any of these financial institutions or anything like that, until you have a death certificate and something from the court or some kind of paperwork saying that you are able to make decisions for this estate. If you're looking at like utility bills and things like that, some of those people will let you cancel. A lot of them actually let us cancel before I had that paperwork. But understand, you're going to cancel whether it's electrical or cell phone, and you're going to give your information and you're going to give your phone number for a contact, because you can't have them calling whoever died. And you're going to be getting the phone calls day after day about the bill that's due. And what I learned from the attorney is with us, I ended up becoming the administrator of my brother's estate. And I mentioned before, the reason my surviving brother and I didn't become co-administrators is because it would have been a pain in the ass. We would have each had to sign every single piece of paper. So it was easier for me to do it. He helped me with quite a few other things. So until you get the death certificate and something from the court saying that you're allowed to make decisions, the banks won't touch you. If most of these companies are going to want the originals as well. So when you are able to get a death certificate, which can take a couple weeks sometimes, you have to get a bunch of originals, because a lot of these companies, when you're trying to prove who you are and that you're in charge, you're going to have to send them an original copy of the death certificate, which I want to say it was $15 or so each. I'm not sure. I don't really remember. And then you're going to have to show or send them an original copy of the court paperwork. For me, it was the court saying that I'm the administrator of the estate. So you have to get, at least a dozen or how many you think you're going to need. You don't want to have to keep going back to the county building or the court to get more copies. And so I think I got, 12 or 15 copies each. And what tends to happen with these companies is you'll send them the original, and whether, say for instance, you found some paperwork like we did on a retirement account, and you get on the phone, they say, yeah, here's where you send all the information. You send them an original death certificate, you send them original court paperwork saying I'm the administrator, and it takes them a couple weeks. Then you call up, and a lot of the companies haven't processed it yet, but the ones who have, sometimes they'll just tell you, oh, okay, yeah, he no longer has an account here. That account was transferred in 1995 to this other company, and then you go through the process again and again and again. None of them will return your originals, and you can't scan them because it's not an original if you scan it and email it. it's all going to have to be through the mail, and that's why it takes some time. To begin this, like I said, I did cancel a lot. Cell phones, his TV provider, and some of those things. Ultimately, a lot of those companies ended up coming after me for the bill. And once again, talked to a lawyer. Here, I wasn't liable for the bill. The bill's not mine. The bill was my older brother's to pay. But these companies are going to try to trick you into paying that, and that's where a lawyer comes in handy. And what the lawyer will do, or at least in my case, what she did is I had to gather all the paperwork for everybody that my brother owed money. And it wasn't a whole lot, but it doesn't matter how much the money, it could be $1. It's whoever he happens to owe. Then the lawyer sent them a certified letter explaining how to get this money, but they had to do it through the court. If they had put the paperwork into the court, I write the check and they get paid. It's more difficult for them to go through the courts. They'll keep sending you bill after bill after bill. And what the lawyer told me is that if you start paying these bills out of your own pocket to be nice, then everybody else can say, well, if you paid them out of your pocket, why aren't you paying me? And so you're going to get sucked into it. And in our case, I think it was 4 or 5 months or something like that later, whoever hadn't submitted a bill to the court, we didn't have to pay. You no longer owe them. And another thing the lawyer took care of was the, in addition to sending out these certified letters, you have to put out ads in the paper, and there are some kind of other ads that she had to do, basically saying, hey, this dude died, and if he owes you money, here's how you put a claim in. And in our case, nobody wanted to go through the proper channels. It was only, probably a total of $8,000 in bills, little credit card and stuff like that. But no one wanted to go through the proper channels. And so in the end, I didn't know any of them. And all that money stayed in the estate. Some of the utilities, and like I said, those things, I started getting calls from collection agencies, so be prepared to deal with that. And some of them are good. One young lady I spoke to at a collection agency, I remember explaining to her, and this was the credit card. Their policy was as soon as the person dies, they send it to collections. There's no waiting period. The lady at the collection agency was outstanding, and so I explained to her, look, I'm just waiting for the court to process the paperwork, and as soon as I'm made the administrator, I'll pay you, as long as you submit it to the court. And she checked in with me every couple of weeks. I want to say it took probably 2 months or something like that to finally get it done, but she was great. On the other hand, his TV provider, who I don't want to get in trouble, so I won't name, he owed them like $24, and they kept calling and threatening to ruin my credit. Fortunately, I talked to a lawyer, and I knew it had nothing to do with my credit. And so they were kind of a huge pain in the ass. You're going to get a little bit of each in these different entities. Putting together all the paperwork is going to be another chore if your case is similar to mine. We had so many different letters and bills and things like that going way back that he just kept as records, but we didn't know which accounts were still valid. So we had to sift through all that, call each company independently to see if he still had an account there, and then you deal with that. When the financial institutions don't want to give up the money, and in my case, as the administrator of the estate, what my sole purpose is to liquidate everything for the estate and pay all the bills, and anything that was left, if there was anything, would go to my mother as next of kin. That was my job, to liquidate. In order for me to do that, the first thing I had to do is get a bank account under the estate, and you can write checks on that, and then you can make deposits for any of these refunds that come back into the deceased person's name. And that alone ended up being a pain, and just, I won't go too deep into it, but I went to my older brother's bank right after he died, and I ended up getting the death certificate pretty quick. I said, I'm not the administrator of the estate yet. Here's a death certificate. Please just freeze the account. Don't let any money in or out, and I'll bring you the paperwork when I get it from the court. 2-3 weeks later, I brought the paperwork in from the court, and they just didn't want to be bothered. And I know it's probably just an individual. It's not the bank itself. But then I noticed that they had charged like a $60 or something like that processing fee or something like that, which they're not supposed to charge dead people money, from what the lawyer told me. But a lot of these places will put you into a position where, is it really worth me wasting all my time to try to get this $60 back, or just move on? And it wasn't worth my time. I had so much going on. And as I mentioned before, this is going on at the same time we're dealing with the house, dealing with the funeral for part of it, and dealing with mom and dad. Right around the time that I ended up starting to go deal with the lawyer in order to become the administrator of the estate, mom and dad, like I said at the time, were still making their own decisions. They were still driving. They were, like I said, a little forgetful in their age. But you could notice, my surviving brother and I noticed that basically our older brother's death had just kind of sucked the life out of him. There really wasn't any motivation for them to do much. They're pretty depressed, and it's understandably so. And so when I started dealing with the estate was when mom asked me if I would take over their finances, which I knew eventually I would be doing anyway. So I started dealing with that at the same time. And fortunately, I already had the lawyer, contacted the lawyer, and wanted to do it properly, which will be a story when I talk about mom and dad stuff too. But just because I already had access to their checks, I already had access to their account under their passwords with their permission, what you need to do to make sure there's going to be no challenges down the road, no government agencies are going to get upset with you. You need to do the paperwork while your loved ones still have their faculties. They can still think, and have them give you permission that's documented. So down the road, no one can come back and go after you for any of these things. So for the beginning, like I said, make sure you have a lawyer. I would recommend a tax person as well. In our older brother's case, what happened is he died in June of 2020. And so obviously he wasn't feeling very well the last few months that he'd been alive. He was probably in the hospital a few months before he actually died. And so the beginning of the year he was feeling horrible and hadn't done any paperwork. A lot of his bills were on automatic pay, so that didn't matter. Some weren't. But one of the big things is he hadn't done his 2019 taxes. So when I ended up taking over his estate, that year I had, obviously my wife and I have our own taxes I had to deal with. Then I had mom and dad decided that they wanted me to take care of their finances, so I had mom and dad's taxes. Then you also have for whoever died, you have their income taxes from the beginning of the year up until the day they died. And then you have their estate taxes from the day they died until the end of the year. So I ended up doing 4 sets of taxes in that year, which is why I say if you try to do it without some professional to help you through the process, it's going to be ridiculously difficult. So as I mentioned in one of the other videos too, this part, it's a lot of stress, and everything's building up to find yourself a healthy outlet. And as I mentioned before, whether it's exercise, talking to family, talk to a counselor if that's your thing, whatever it is, you're going to need a healthy outlet, because this turns into a full-time job. When the institutions finally come around, like the financial institutions, to help you, the paperwork is unbelievable. So like I said before, they don't want to give up the money, so they don't make it easy. And some of the companies will, after several phone calls, they'll finally give you the paperwork to fill out. Some companies actually told me that I had to cancel my older brother's account and then open an estate account. So the process of canceling his account was a 35-page packet. Filled out my 35-page packet, send that in. 2-3 weeks go by. They finally said, great, you have the estate account open now. I go, okay, how do I liquidate it? That's my job. That's what the court told me to do. What do I do? Here's your other 35-page packet in order to liquidate it. And then you go through the whole process again. Unfortunately, most of it's not the same, so you can't just duplicate the prior packet. And when you put together that you're probably dealing with that for 6, 8, 10 different companies doing 10, 15, 30, 40 pages at a time, it's consuming your entire life and your entire being. So I'll do a little bit more on the estate in another video. I do want to keep these a little bit shorter, like I said. But until the next one, God bless you all, and God bless the United States of America.